Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fluent Podcast. I'm your host, John, and today I want to talk about something that I think a lot of you are really struggling with, and that's having natural conversations in English. You know, a lot of language learners tell me the same thing. They can read English pretty well, they understand movies and podcasts, they know a ton of grammar rules, but the moment they have to actually talk to someone, especially someone who's a native speaker, they just freeze up. They get nervous, they forget words, or they spend too long thinking about whether they're using the right tense. And honestly, I totally get it. I've been there myself when I was learning other languages. So today I want to share some practical tips that are going to help you feel more confident when you're having conversations. Let me start with something really important. When you're learning a language, there's this gap between what you know and what you can use in real time, right? You might know a word, but when you're speaking, you can't access it fast enough. That's totally normal, and it happens to everyone. The difference between people who become fluent and people who stay stuck is that fluent people practice in a specific way. They don't just study vocabulary lists or grammar textbooks. Instead, they focus on doing things that prepare them for actual conversations. So let's talk about how you can do that too. First, I want to address something that a lot of learners do wrong. They wait until they feel completely ready to have a conversation. They think, okay, when I finish this grammar course, when I learn 500 more words, then I'll start talking to people. But here's the thing, you're never going to feel completely ready. I know that sounds scary, but it's actually good news because it means you can start right now. The best way to improve your conversational English is to actually have conversations. And I mean real conversations with real people, not just talking to yourself in the mirror, although that's helpful too. You want to practice with other people whenever you can. Now, I know some of you might not have access to native speakers in your daily life, so let me give you some options. There are apps and websites where you can find conversation partners. Some are free, some you have to pay for, but the important thing is that you're actually speaking. You could use platforms like Tandem or HelloTalk, or if you want something more structured, you could try Italki or Verbling, where you can have lessons with teachers. But honestly, even if you can't afford lessons, you can find language exchange partners online. You just need to be willing to put yourself out there. Here's another thing that's really important for improving your conversational skills. You have to get comfortable making mistakes. And I mean really comfortable. Most learners are afraid of sounding stupid or being corrected, so they speak very carefully. They think about every word, and when they make a mistake, they get embarrassed or frustrated. But here's what I want you to understand. Native speakers make mistakes all the time. We say the wrong word. We forget what we're saying halfway through a sentence. We use grammar that isn't technically perfect. We don't care because we're focused on communicating the message, not on being perfect. When you're in a conversation, your goal isn't to speak perfectly. Your goal is to communicate your ideas. So let go of the perfection thing. The more you practice speaking, even when you're making mistakes, the faster your brain is going to get at producing English automatically. One of the biggest breakthroughs I've seen learners make is when they stop translating in their head. A lot of you are probably doing this right now. You think in your native language, then you translate to English, then you say the English sentence. It's a slow process, and it doesn't really work for fluent conversation. What you want to train your brain to do is think directly in English. Now, I'm not saying you need to wake up one day and think completely in English, but you can practice this in smaller ways. When you're having a conversation, try to respond with the first English thing that comes to your mind instead of waiting until you've formed the perfect sentence in your head. Yeah, it might be a little messy, but it's going to train your brain to produce English faster. Let me give you a practical exercise you can do today. Pick a topic that you like talking about. It could be anything. Your job, your hobbies, something you're interested in, whatever. Now, set a timer for 2 minutes and try to talk about that topic out loud in English without stopping. Don't worry about perfect sentences. Don't worry about grammar. Just talk. If you get stuck on a word, make something up. Use a synonym. Describe it in a different way. The goal is to keep talking and not have any silent pauses. You'll be surprised how hard this is at first, but after you do it a few times, it gets easier. And this exercise is amazing because it trains your brain to think on the fly, which is exactly what you need to do in real conversations. Another thing that really helps with natural conversation is understanding the difference between formal and informal English. A lot of learners learn textbook English, which is kind of formal and stiff. But when people talk to each other in real life, we're usually much more casual. We use shorter sentences, we use contractions, we use phrasal verbs, we say things like, and I mean in the middle of sentences. We interrupt each other. We laugh. We make jokes. None of that is in textbooks, but it's what real conversations actually sound like. So I want you to pay attention to how native speakers actually talk. Listen to podcasts. Watch TV shows and movies. Listen to how people speak in different situations. Not just what they say, but how they say it. Where do they pause? What words do they use a lot? Do they speak slowly or quickly? What emotions do they express? When you start paying attention to these things, your brain is going to pick up on natural patterns, and your own speaking is going to sound more natural too. Let me tell you about something called filler words, because this is something that helps you sound more natural and also helps you buy yourself time when you're thinking. Native speakers use filler words all the time. We say, basically, kind of, sort of. These words are usually looked down on in formal contexts, but in conversation, they're completely natural and normal. They help you sound more like a real person, and they also give your brain a chance to think about what you're going to say next. So don't be afraid to use them. In fact, practicing using some filler words naturally is going to help you sound less robotic when you're speaking. Here's something else that's really helpful. Focus on common phrases and expressions instead of just individual words. There are certain phrases that native speakers use all the time. Things like, "That makes sense," "I get what you mean," "Tell me more," "No way," "That's crazy," "For sure," "Exactly," and hundreds of others. When you learn phrases like this instead of just random vocabulary, you're learning how people actually communicate. And these phrases are much easier to use in conversation because you've learned them as a unit, not as separate words. So instead of learning words, try learning common expressions and phrases. You can find these by listening carefully to podcasts and TV shows, or you can look for natural English expressions or English phrases for conversations online. Now I want to talk about something that's specific to conversational English, and that's active listening. You see, a lot of people think that improving your speaking is all about practicing production, like practicing how to say things. But here's the truth. You can't have a good conversation if you don't understand what the other person is saying. And beyond just understanding the words, you need to actually listen and be present in the conversation. You need to respond to what they said. You need to ask follow-up questions. You need to show that you're engaged. A good conversation is not just about you talking. It's about back and forth. So, when you're practicing conversations, don't just focus on waiting for your turn to speak. Practice really listening to what the other person is saying. If you don't understand something, ask them to repeat it or explain it differently. Native speakers do this all the time, and it's totally acceptable. Speaking of asking questions, this is a skill that's so useful for conversations. When you're talking to someone and you want to keep the conversation going, asking questions is a great way to do that. It takes pressure off you because the other person is doing most of the talking, and it helps you understand them better. And here's a bonus. People love talking about themselves. If you ask good questions and you listen to the answers, people are going to like talking to you. They're going to think you're a good conversationalist, even if you're making mistakes in your English. So practice asking open-ended questions. Instead of, "Do you like coffee?" say, "What's your favorite type of coffee?" Or, "Tell me about the best coffee you've ever had." Questions like that keep conversations going, and they give you time to think about your next response. Let me also talk about dealing with anxiety when you're speaking. A lot of learners get really nervous when they have to speak, and that nervousness makes everything worse. Your mind goes blank. You can't remember words, you speak too quietly. You rush through what you're saying. Sound familiar? Here's what I want you to know. Everyone gets nervous sometimes, even native speakers. The difference is that native speakers have had so much practice with speaking that they're comfortable being uncomfortable. They know they're probably going to survive whatever conversation they get into, so they don't stress about it so much. You can develop this confidence too. It just takes practice and time. Every conversation you have, you're building your confidence. You're proving to yourself that you can do it, even if you're not perfect. One practical thing you can do to manage anxiety is to prepare a little bit before you know you're going to have a conversation. I'm not saying memorize a script or anything like that, but if you know you're going to order coffee at an English-speaking cafe, or you're going to have a meeting with someone in English, it can help to spend 5 minutes thinking about what you might want to say or what the conversation might be about. Think about potential questions they might ask you and how you might answer. This prep work isn't going to make you rigid or robotic. It's going to make you feel more confident. And when you feel more confident, you're actually going to be more flexible in the conversation because you're not so worried. Now, I want to address something that I think is really important, but that people don't talk about enough: your self-talk and your mindset. When you're learning English and you're not fluent yet, it's easy to be really hard on yourself. You're thinking things like, "I'm so bad at this," or "I sound so stupid," or "I'll never be fluent." And here's the thing. That negative self-talk is actually hurting you. It's making you more anxious. It's making you less willing to practice. And it's making your brain less able to learn. What you need to do instead is practice positive self-talk. Tell yourself things like, "I'm getting better every day," or "I'm doing pretty good for someone who's still learning," or "Making mistakes is part of learning." This isn't just feel-good nonsense. This actually affects your performance and your willingness to keep trying. So be kind to yourself. Celebrate the small wins. Let me tell you about another strategy that's really helpful: recording yourself speaking. I know a lot of people don't like hearing their own voice, but this is actually incredibly useful. When you record yourself, you can hear what you actually sound like. You can identify areas where you're struggling. Maybe you mumble. Maybe you speak too fast. Maybe you have a really strong accent that makes it hard for people to understand you. Maybe you pause too much. When you know what the issues are, you can work on them. You can listen to your recordings and compare them to native speakers. You can see how their intonation is different from yours, or how they use stress on certain syllables. This kind of self-analysis is going to help you improve faster. Here's something really practical that I want you to do. Find English content that you enjoy and consume it regularly. I'm talking about podcasts, YouTube channels, TV shows, movies, music, books, whatever. But here's the key. It has to be something you actually like. If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to stick with it. And you want to consume this stuff regularly, like several times a week at minimum. When you're consuming English content that you enjoy, you're not just learning the language. You're also picking up on natural speech patterns. You're getting exposed to new vocabulary and context. You're learning about the culture behind the language. And honestly, it's fun. It doesn't feel like studying, but it's one of the best things you can do to improve your English. And hey, if you're looking for a podcast to listen to, you're already here. So keep listening to the Fluent Podcast. I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like what you're hearing, please leave a rating and a review. That really helps other learners find the podcast. Now, let me talk about something that I think is really overlooked: speaking slowly and clearly. A lot of learners think that the faster they speak, the more fluent they sound. But actually, it's the opposite. Native speakers who are confident speak at a comfortable pace that allows listeners to understand them. Speaking more slowly doesn't make you sound less fluent. It makes you sound more professional and thoughtful. So don't rush. Take your time. Speak clearly. Pause between phrases if you need to. When you do this, people are going to understand you better, and you're going to feel more in control of the conversation. Let me give you some advice about pronunciation, because this is something that affects how well people understand you. Now, you don't need to have a perfect accent. There's no such thing as a perfect accent, and you don't need to sound like a native speaker to be fluent, but you do want to be understood. So focus on sounds that are really different from your native language. If you speak Spanish and you're learning English, for example, the TH sound might be tricky for you. Or if you speak an Asian language, the R and L sounds might be different. Whatever your native language is, there are probably a few English sounds that are tricky. Focus on those. Practice them. Watch videos on YouTube about how to pronounce those sounds. The more you can improve your pronunciation in those key areas, the better people are going to understand you. Here's something I want you to remember. Fluency isn't about being perfect. It's about being able to communicate your ideas clearly and relatively smoothly, even if you make mistakes. You can be fluent and still make grammar mistakes. You can be fluent and still struggle with certain words or accents. Fluency is about comfort and confidence in communicating. So if that's your goal, then your practice should be focused on actual communication, not perfection. You should be spending most of your time doing things like having conversations, listening to real English, consuming content you enjoy. You shouldn't be spending huge amounts of time doing grammar exercises. I mean, some grammar is helpful, but it shouldn't be your main focus. Let me also talk about the power of repetition and pattern recognition. Your brain learns language partly through repetition. When you hear the same phrase or expression multiple times in different contexts, your brain starts to recognize the pattern, and it becomes more automatic for you. So don't be afraid to repeat yourself. Don't be afraid to study the same podcast episode multiple times. Maybe the first time you listen to understand the general ideas. The second time you listen to the specific words and phrases. The third time you listen, focusing on pronunciation and intonation. This repetition is going to help your brain internalize the patterns of English. Now, I want to talk about something that's specific to conversational English, and that's discourse markers. These are words and phrases that help connect ideas in a conversation. Things like, anyway, by the way, speaking of which, that reminds me, what I'm trying to say is, here's the thing, to make a long story short. Native speakers use these all the time to guide their listeners through their thoughts. When you use discourse markers naturally, your English is going to sound much more fluent and much more like how native speakers actually talk. So pay attention to these when you're listening to podcasts or watching videos, and try to use them in your own conversations. Let me give you a challenge. I want you to have a conversation with someone in English this week. It could be a language exchange partner, a friend, a family member, someone online. I don't care who it is, but I want you to actually do it. And here's what I want you to focus on during that conversation. Try to use at least 3 new expressions or phrases that you've learned recently. Try to ask at least 3 follow-up questions. Try to speak without preparing everything you're going to say in advance. Just let it be natural and messy. And after the conversation, I want you to reflect on it for a couple of minutes. What went well? What was difficult? What would you do differently next time? This kind of reflection is really helpful for improvement. You know, one thing that I think people underestimate is the power of consistency. You don't need to study English for 5 hours a day to improve, but you need to do something every single day. Even if it's just 30 minutes, if you do it every day, you're going to make progress. Your brain is constantly learning from the input you're giving it. It's building neural pathways. It's making connections. And when you do something consistently, those pathways get stronger. So commit to doing something in English every single day. Listen to a podcast, have a short conversation, watch a video, whatever it is. Just make it a habit. Here's something I learned when I was learning other languages. Enjoying the process is just as important as the goal. If you're only focused on becoming fluent someday in the future, you're missing out on all the progress you're making right now. You're missing out on the fun of learning. You're missing out on connecting with new people and new cultures. So try to enjoy the journey. Try to find aspects of learning English that you actually like. Maybe you like movies, so watch more movies in English. Maybe you like music, so listen to English music. Maybe you like podcasts, so listen to podcasts about topics you care about. When you enjoy the process, you're going to stick with it longer, and you're going to get better faster. Let me wrap up with some final advice. Number 1, start having conversations. Don't wait until you feel ready. Number 2, make mistakes and learn from them. They're not failures. They're data about how to improve. Number 3, consume English content that you enjoy regularly. Number 4, be consistent. Do something in English every day. Number 5, be patient with yourself. Language learning takes time, and that's okay. And number 6, remember that fluency is about communication, not perfection. Focus on being able to express your ideas, not on saying everything perfectly. I really hope these tips are helpful for you. If you found this episode useful, I'd love it if you could leave some feedback. Drop me a message on social media or send me an email. Whatever way works for you. I read all of it, and it helps me know what content you want to hear more of. And if you haven't subscribed to the Fluent podcast yet, please do. New episodes come out regularly, and I'm covering all sorts of topics to help you improve your English. Thanks so much for listening today. Keep practicing, keep having conversations, and keep improving. You're doing great, and I'll talk to you in the next episode. Take care.